G'day guys, and welcome back to another episode of Caleb's Conversation podcast. Obviously, we're back in the room again, ready to get straight into another great conversation, and I've brought on two lovely people who I'm very excited to talk to. But before I introduce my lovely guests, I have to address something that I said at the end of my last podcast episode with regards to the NRL Grand Final. I did say that I would be going and that I would be doing a match vlog, and that I would be kind of documenting the experience. And then for some of you may already know this, but a couple days before the grand final on Sunday, that there was a couple COVID cases in the Brisbane area. So the Queensland government was like, nah, let's shrink it from like a sold out crowd to a 75% crowd, which doesn't make any sense. Very, very silly. Like, the difference between a 50% crowd and a 100% crowd for being COVID safe doesn't really make sense, considering you're allowed, 40,000 people in a stadium, but you're only allowed 100 people at a wedding and 30 people at a house party. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but unfortunately my tickets, got revoked, and I was one of the unlucky people that wasn't allowed to go, so I didn't actually get an opportunity to experience that and document that for you guys, so but it is what it is, and we move forward in life, and I thought I'd just let you guys know off the top of the bat with regards to why that content didn't come to you guys at all. So obviously we move into my two guests, and I'm very, very honoured to have both Xanthie and Natalie on to talk about a project that I came across through your little Facebook feed. Natalie, you had done some posting with regards to some awards attention that you guys did, and I was very, very surprised, and I checked it out. It's available on YouTube. It's called Smile. It is a web series, kind of like a television pilot type thing, and it was done as a Griffith Film School Masters type project that you were spearheading. And Xanthie, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you did in your role and what you kind of get up to on a day-to-day basis?
So I was the writer and producer for Smile. I did it as part of my final master's project, which usually for a final master's project, and this is what they told me, you do a short film. You do something short form, something that you can take to Screen Queensland. Now, I did an internship with Screen Queensland, so I know how tough it is to actually get funding through them. I know that they've got like a lot of parameters that they have in place. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do it all. And they were just like, no, focus on your exegesis, focus on the academic. No, I'm going to do it all. So I did. So I raised $14,000 over COVID. Thanks, government, for giving you that sweet COVID bonus.
Yes, absolutely.
Went to a good cause. So raised $14,000, got crew on board, got Natalie on board, which she was a godsend. And we did it. We did it in a month. It was February and 16-day shoot. Got it all sorted. Post-production was a nightmare, but as it usually is. And then got it out. So that was really nice. And the story is, it's inspired by the Medusa myth, very loosely.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that concept, so I'm very excited to hear more about it.
The Medusa myth is all about a young woman, ancient Greek myth, a young woman who, trigger warning, is raped in the Temple of Athena.
I was going to say, there's going to be some adult content in this episode, so if you're not prepared for that, if you don't want to listen to that, then get out of here. But most of my people know that we've got no filter on this podcast, so just let loose. She's raped by Poseidon, who of course is Greek god, and Athena gets really angry and decides to curse her with snakes for hair and the ability to turn people into stone. And my thought was, Athena, goddess of war and knowledge, like she's one of my favorite goddesses in Greek myth. She would have been too clever to have been like, no, it was all Medusa's fault and not Poseidon's fault. So my thought was, maybe she didn't curse Medusa. She actually gifted her with an ability to protect herself, so it never happened again to her. So then I was thinking, like, what about a story where a young woman goes through a lot of trauma and ends up kind of Medusaing herself, becoming something monstrous in order to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again to her.
And then I looked at a lot of films, like a lot of horror films, that have that kind of monstrous element where you get to the end of the film and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know whether I actually empathize with this character anymore or whether I fear them. And that's what kind of turned into what we ended up with, which was what I call a final straw girl, which is a girl who goes through a lot of trauma and ends up changed into something monstrous by the end of it. So that's what my exegesis was about. That's what we tried to do with Faith, with Smile. Yeah, it was a really fun experience.
I can tell that you've put a lot of like thought process and, you know, you've gone really in depth into the mythology behind it to kind of, you know, be the core kind of concept behind the characters that you've got in this story that are obviously goddesses and dealing with these, you know, large mythic creatures, but you can tell that you're drawing from that and then creating a really good human story that is quite tragic in the end. And that part I actually quite enjoyed. So, Natalie, what was your kind of roles and responsibilities on this production? You just kind of tell us a little bit about what you got up to on this project.
Yes, I was the director. I actually was brought in a little bit later because there was another director originally, but you guys parted ways because of disagreements. So, yeah, I kind of was thrown into the deep end a little bit like, all right, this is the script.
As many directors are.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'd never read anything like it from Griffith. Like, as you were saying before, most people do short films. So I was like, oh, wow, they're doing an entire miniseries in one go. That's awesome. And so, I was totally excited when, like, Xanthie offered me the position to direct. And yeah, I kind of just caught up with everyone, like, this is where we're with production design, this is where we are here and there. We've got a location, you know, we did all that stuff very quickly. And, like, here are the actors, choose who you want to pick to play the characters kind of thing. And yeah, and we just jumped straight into it, I guess.
So you were in a position with regards to casting where you hadn't already selected cast and stuff and you got to kind of have a bit creative control there.
Yeah, they'd done auditions already. And the casting director, he sent me all the clips and I sort of watched them and I was like, all right, I'd like to choose, we got Cam for Faith, you know, we had Dean for Richard and stuff like that. And I was like, yep, I like these guys, let's call them up and let's start rehearsals. So yeah, we did about a week long of rehearsals and we picked kind of the most important scenes that we really wanted to nail down emotionally. And yeah, it was just a solid week of just rehearse. So,
That's good. I'm loving what you're saying right there because rehearsals are so important. As someone who has also worked in pre-production and casting and been involved in that whole cycle, I have always been a proponent of do as much practice and rehearsals beforehand so that when you rock up to set, not only do your actors know what they're doing, but everyone else, like from a creative standpoint, knows what to expect.
Yeah.
Obviously, it depends on the project because some projects are more improv orientated, whereas some are more follow the script, otherwise we're gonna friggin' freak out. So I guess it's kind of project dependent, but when you're able to kind of get that sort of practice under your belt, that way when you get on set, when money's burning, time's, you know, flying away from you, you're able to go, all right, we want to do this for this scene, we want to change it for this scene, bang, 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 you get your shots, you get your takes, and then you hopefully get into an edit room with a nice solid footage.
Yeah.
So, but you obviously said you came in late to the project. When you come in late to the project as a director and a script is already set, do you find that a lot more easy coming onto a project like that in that scenario, or is it a bit more difficult because you weren't there at the very early stages of its development?
I think I quite liked it just because, like, I've written scripts before myself and I feel like it's a lot harder to take a script that you've written and directed because they're two completely different roles. Like, with Xanthie having written it, I could kind of have my own thoughts as a director and sort of read it and be like, oh, I can picture it looking like this and like that, and if I was unsure about something, I could just consult with Xanthie. Like, when you were writing the scene, what were you thinking about?
Were you on set as well?
Yeah, I was on set. I very much, so after I wrote it and I handed it over to Natalie, I did my very utmost to give her creative control wherever possible. Like, that was what I wanted. I'm not a director, and I really am a big fan of the idea that when you bring somebody else in that kind of creative capacity but a different role, you get like a different perspective and you get a different view on it, and you can kind of, it's almost like a writer's room where you get kind of different human experiences adding to the content. So I was really keen on making sure that Natalie had as much creative control as we could get. And she was really great. Like, I was worried that with the original director, the disagreement was about creative control. They wanted full creative control and
Over the script and stuff, you mean?
over the script, yeah.
Okay.
And we'd been workshopping it for a long time, and then they found that they wanted more creative control than I was willing to give. Wanted to change like the basement aspect and move the basement into which the basement aspect of the film is very much like the underbelly. It's like a physical embodiment of the underbelly of the story. So I was very much attached to that. And so, yeah, bringing Natalie on, especially at such a late stage, I was really worried that things would change drastically. It was January when you came on, and then we were filming in February. So it was about a month of prep. And I kind of, at the very beginning as well, when we were doing the interview, I'm just like, it's going to be intense. It's going to be really intense for that, like, month. And then we're going straight into production. So, yeah, she really handled it so well.
Yeah, like when I got her email that I'd got the director position, I was like, oh my God, we have so much work to do. Like, where do we start, you know?
Yeah, it's very important. As soon as you get that role, you need to go straight into director mode and just drive straight in, because there's no sort of time to just, celebrate or anything. It's like, any sort of position where, you get a big promotion or whatnot, or you get into a position where stuff needs to get done. There's no sort of opportunity to be like, all right, yay for me. It's ready. All right, we need to get a job done, and let's do it the best that we can with the people that we've got. And I think that's very important as well, especially finding people that you can collaborate with that are all like-minded. And within this industry especially, I think you'll both agree, it's quite difficult to find people that operate on the same wavelengths as you. But when you do find those people, it's so much more rewarding. And I feel like, in my experience, I've definitely had that. Working with great people has been so much more enjoyable. Yeah, obviously there's sometimes you just get with people and the group dynamic doesn't quite work, or people aren't pulling their weight, and that's the unfortunate thing. That I feel like that's not just a film industry thing. I think that's a life thing. Some people just don't pull their weight, but that is it is what it is, and people have to kind of pull themselves up and say, well, it's not your fault for falling down, but it's your responsibility to get back up.
Yeah.
And if people can have that mindset, I think that's very, very important. And with regards to your project, I'm actually interested to hear what it was like. So did you assemble a bunch of crew that you knew, or was it just kind of a mismatch of people that you kind of brought on to fill in specific roles?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a master's student, you're encouraged to use master's students as much as possible, and I did put the word out there just saying, look, I'm looking for crew, and I didn't get a lot of response back from the master's community, which, we ended up, I reached out to a lot of people in the undergrad, because I thought, like, I'm really impressed with the undergrad. I wish that I had have done the undergrad at Griffith, because everyone learns such amazing skills and it's very structured and everything like that. And they're all very talented people that go through there. And I'd worked with a couple of people before, like our production designer and art director. I'd worked with them before, but mostly they were new people. And I was very lucky. We even had like a couple of people from JMC or non-university affiliated people that came in as well. And yeah, I was very lucky that it all worked really well together. Everyone kind of who came on board treated it like a full professional project, which is what I wanted.
That's awesome.
And considering I've produced, I think it's 3 or 4 short films during my time during Masters. And they all had various issues with the production experience, whether that was a failing on my part for not being organised enough, or whether it was, as you were saying, like just different people, different personalities, kind of struggling to work together. With this, I just found that production worked so well. Like, we had 16 days, we had it all planned out, and we didn't have any issues with weather. I think we had
there was just
issue,
the one day.
on one day.
But we picked it up pretty easily.
Yeah, and the cast was amazing. The crew all worked so well together. We had a couple of people who had some little emotional difficulties, but I find that as a producer on set, I was able to kind of work with them and make sure, like, my main thing is that everyone should be safe and feel like they're being looked after on set, which is why I was on set as well, just kind of as a person to bounce things off of and to stay awake until 7 o'clock in the morning changing call sheets and things like that. So, it was an amazing experience for the actual shoot. Really enjoyable. And I think the biggest thing from it was everyone loved the food, which...
Did you have a catering person specifically? Or?
No, it was me.
Oh, you did it? Oh, okay, cool.
Which I hate catering. Just word of advice, if anybody asks me to do unit, I'm going to say no, very emphatically, because I hate doing it. But at the same time, it means you get the smiles of your crew who are happy to be well fed, and they just work so well when everything works well. That's probably my biggest advice for anybody is make sure you've got good unit, good catering, because it makes a big difference.
That's why when a lot of those big Hollywood productions have like big buffets of just like all you can eat, and obviously they've got the budget for it, but it's that same sort of thing. It helps with morale and keeps everyone fed and energized and ready to go.
We had on my current project that I'm working on, we have breakfast, lunch, and afternoon tea.
Nice.
Because you gotta have it. You gotta make sure they're all doing well.
Now, something I just wanted to quickly touch on with regards to when you were talking about crew and stuff. An analogy I like to use with regards to the film industry and filmmaking is that it's kind of like you're on a train track, right? And if the train stops, that stops everything behind it, right? It's like when you're on a ladder, right? If one person at the top of the ladder stops, everyone else who's working towards a one collective goal can't continue to move up that ladder, and it just slows and stagnates the whole project. So I feel like that's very important, is to also make sure that you're doing your job, but everyone else is operating 100%, because if you're operating 100% and everyone else is operating 100%, the team's operating 100%. I think that is really important to have in a team environment, and filmmaking is so team-based oriented. I think it's interesting that you were talking about how you kind of got a collection of different people from different places and different organizations and stuff like that. Was it hard to kind of get a trust of that, or was it kind of just as soon as you met them you knew, all right, these are the people that are going to get this done?
I had a lot of faith, and I mean, it's fitting. I kind of, whenever I brought somebody on, I tried to kind of have a chat with them and just kind of show them my passion for the project. And if they responded to that, then I knew that they were a good fit. And I also relied heavily on like my heads of department to guide me with who they wanted to work with as well. So if we had, so I know like Chase, our DOP, ended up bringing on a lot of camera assistants that she was comfortable working with, which I'm happy to do. Which
is a pretty standard thing in industry. Normally your head of department brings on people that they're familiar with, that they can trust to work in a productive manner. So that's pretty standard.
And I think that works really well, and it worked really well for us. And I mean, crewing up is always really difficult. I think there were a few times where we had to put up posts on Griffith sites. We would have done that probably about 6 or 7 times, and by we I mean Michael, who was my co-producer. He started off as production assistant, and then he did such an amazing job with helping me out that I was just like, you're co-producer now, you get that credit, and that also meant more responsibilities, which was great.
That was another interesting thing as well, like a production where there was like producer and writer, which isn't that common, but then another co-producer, because I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty solid, because I've worked on a couple of Masters productions and I feel like they're very hit or miss. Some of them are just really not up to scratch, and then some like this one was just amazing. Like when I came in, you could really feel that everyone was like serious and everyone was passionate, and I was like, oh, I have a great feeling about this. I'm so ready to jump in with these people and just make this production.
And one of the things that I kind of mentioned up top that kind of drew my attention towards this project was the fact that it got a lot of awards attention. And do you just want to explain what the awards were, where they came from, and just kind of expand on that, because it's quite impressive.
I mean, there's too many to remember.
Not to toot up on.
Festival circuit is really interesting. I've tried to do it on a few projects before that I've produced, and I've found that it was really difficult to get much recognition, especially with short films, because there's so many. The market is really saturated with them. Web series is a little bit different. So Michael and I worked quite closely together to research into some festivals, and we mostly applied for ones where there was a web series
Option?
yeah, category. And we've found mostly like horror that we've been looking at as well. It's kind of a snowball effect, I feel like, as well. Like once you get recognised by one place, then other people take notice. So that's what it's been like. And I mean, at the moment, we applied for a certain number of projects. We've got about a third that we're waiting festivals to get back to us, about another third that we've gotten positive responses from, and another third that we haven't gotten positive responses from. And this is the thing, is that when you're doing social media, you are saying like, oh yeah, we got into this, we got into that. But I still get those disappointing emails where it's like, oh, no, you haven't gotten into this one. And I'm like, oh. And sometimes, like, I think last week I got 3 in one day, and I was just like, really? Just like, oh, God, that's really disappointing. But you've got to take the wins when you get them. And I mean, it looks impressive on the photos on social media.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have like there's a lot of nominations. There's a couple of wins.
Yeah. And
Like it's pretty good. Honestly,
yeah. And I think what I wanted from this project above all was mostly just to be viewed and seen and distributed and to get an audience, because as much as like I put my money into it and everything like that, and getting money back would be amazing. But in the end, it's about like, we had an amazing crew, and I want to make sure that they are recognized for the amazing efforts that they had. And if I know that 50% of my crew get jobs because of this project, I'll be happy.
Yeah, like definitely as a director, feeling like everyone in the crew was really doing their job. Like pretty much, like I can say safely, most of the crew were like, they were showing up on time, they were doing their job. I think like the analogy you were talking about before, like something I really love about the film industry and working on productions is that you can really feel that everyone's individual roles are important. Doesn't matter how big or how small. It's like, especially like being director, like having all these like assistant directors, like just telling someone like, can you get this person while I'm doing this and doing that. It's like so helpful to just have people there to support and to help you, so that you're not just kind of drowning in your spot. You know?
Helping you up that ladder.
Yeah.
Do you want to actually explain for maybe people who don't actually have a fully a well-realized grasp of what a film director does on set? Do you just want to explain what a director is, what they do, and then what your experience was as a director working on Smile?
So I think like in a perfect world, a director would be specifically focused on the actors and the performance. But honestly, like, film sets are so chaotic, and there's so many things that change here and there that I've got to like help work with Chase, our DOP, on like camera angles and stuff like that. Because sometimes we've got to change things up last minute. If things happen, if we run out of time, definitely working really close with our first assistant director, who pretty much just runs the schedule and makes sure everybody's on time. And we had an amazing first director. Like, she was really good at keeping everyone on time, which was really great. Because, like, I feel like a first assistant director, if you have a bad one, it can, like, derail things. Because, like, when you start running out of time, the quality just goes down. But our assistant director was just so good.
Like a train conductor, just pushing people through, get this done.
Yeah, it's like, all right, moving on, next thing. And, like, especially helping with disputes as well, if there were any disagreements on things. Just like, all right, here's the compromise, let's go with it. And we're all like, okay.
Yeah, you definitely need someone who's very decisive in that role.
Very decisive,
I agree.
yeah.
So, you go.
With Natalie as well, one of the big things that I noticed was with the rehearsals, it helped to build trust between her and the cast. So I found with the rehearsals, I went to the first day of rehearsals, and then I was there for on set. Like, I didn't see the rest of the rehearsals. And the first day was a little, like, we were experimenting a bit. And I found that Natalie, I hope you don't mind me saying this, was kind of finding her feet with it. And by the time that we got to set, because I was kind of going like, oh, okay, we'll see how we go on set, and we'll see how it all goes, and I can always step in and provide support if needed and things like that for for creative decisions. But once we got to set, all of that time rehearsing, spending time with the actors, and really thinking about all of the creative choices of where people would be positioned and why we do that and everything like that, like from what I could gather, because I'm not a director, it really helped to solidify that trust, and it made it so much smoother when you guys were working together on set, and your confidence went miles ahead from where it was on that first day of rehearsals as well, which I was really excited to see.
Especially when you're at such a early stage of your careers where you're still learning your craft and figuring things out. I think it's so important to remember that we are still learning, especially in a film school environment.
Yeah.
I feel like so many people are so consumed by this needs to be the best work of art that I've ever done. It's like you need to understand that you're creating something with the intention of learning, and film school should be a landscape for you to make mistakes, learn from that, do it better, so that when you get into industry and you're getting paid and you're on an actual working set, you're not making those same mistakes and you're not having that possibility of getting fired as a result of it.
Yeah.
And in this political landscape, that's quite possible.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting, I think, to see how people are kind of transitioning from film school into the industry. And in Australia, you obviously mentioned Screen Queensland earlier, which we will touch on. It's very interesting to see how Australia is able to kind of maintain a film industry at all, because the opportunities from a local perspective are not plentiful, and a lot of the consistent work that you do get is from Hollywood stuff that comes over here that shoots on the Gold Coast or in Sydney, and you kind of get crewed on for those projects. But Australian made specific content, I don't feel like there's a lot of it out there, and I guess there's probably a good opportunity to dive into it when you were mentioning about trying to get funding for these projects. What's your experience with Screen Queensland or Screen Australia or whoever, and kind of why do you think that government body is so slow moving in that respect?
Well, working with Screen Queensland, I used to do eligibility checks and things like that, and I used to sit in on meetings where they decide who got funding. The big thing is they get a set amount of money from the government, and that money, whether it grows or shrinks, depends on how successful these projects are. If you put all of that money into local projects and you get half of them flopping because they didn't get enough funding from international representatives, or they don't have enough of a powerhouse behind them, or anything like that, that means that money that the government gets shrinks, which means that there's less opportunities for little things to be funded. I was on a project, Scream Queensland, where it was horror shorts, and I was on one of those as a unit manager. And those kind of projects, which are shorter form, less financially viable, they're going to bring back less returns, can then be supported because there's that extra little surplus, because they're putting the large chunk of their money into international projects. I mean, it's disappointing for local projects because you want them to be supported, and they do support quite a few local projects. And they have been able to do that more and more because they've been funding the international ones and getting that revenue back from it. So it's all a balancing act with them. And I find Screen Queensland does a really great job. I don't have much experience with Screen Australia, but Screen Queensland does a really amazing job. And I've been working with a couple of guys from Continuance Pictures on another project, and they work quite closely with Screen Queensland. And even just when it can't be financial support, going to them for even advice or connections, networking, they're very receptive to anything that's going to be able to help the industry locally. It's just, with finance. And I'm Facebook friends with a lot of filmmakers, and they will put up, I didn't get funding for this, and I should have gotten funding for this. And it's like, you've got to understand the kind of climate around it all, which is why as much as my advisors were telling me just do the pilot and then get funding, I was just like, I can't expect Screen Queensland to watch what I do for a pilot and go, oh, yes, we're going to give them $30,000. It's not realistic necessarily. I mean, it's great and it happens sometimes.
But those opportunities are so rare. Yeah.
Yeah, and as much as we all as filmmakers, we need to believe in ourselves and think that we're doing an amazing job, because otherwise you're dead in the water. You also have to be realistic in that there are 50 other, at least, filmmakers in the local area that are doing something that's amazing as well. So,
or they're doing the exact same thing as you and trying to wiggle their way in.
Yeah.
And this is the unfortunate reality that filmmaking and movies and that sort of landscape, it's all about money. If you're making money, you will continue to make more of that in order to bring in more money.
Yeah.
And a very cynical perspective might be oh well, there's no art in that, and there's it's just these corporate executives sitting in an office who go, all right, let's make another Marvel movie because that's going to make money. And I love the Marvel movies, but the reality is that's a franchise that is successful, and they will continue to keep pumping it out until it is not successful.
Yeah.
Transformers is a good example of that. Made billions of dollars, that franchise. And then they decided to do something a bit more artistic with Bumblebee, and it didn't do as well. So the executives were like, well, we're not doing any more of this. And then the potential for Michael Bay to return and all that sort of rumors spun up. So that's a great example of, that's obviously in the Hollywood system. Within Australia, we obviously have a much smaller economy, a much smaller population, and of course less money to be thrown at stuff like this. But I think from my basic understanding that I have, that I've come to learn, is that I feel like because we have so much reliance on the government to give us funding for our artistic projects, I feel like that's where the problem lies, because obviously the government has to pay for a heap of different shit, right? Like they don't have time to focus on artistic stuff, to be fair. Like obviously I'm an artist, I like to focus on stuff like this, I love talking about movies and all that. I want to see more attention given to that, because I think it's actually very, very important, and the pandemic has proved that. When everyone was locked in their houses and locked in their rooms, what were they doing? Sitting on Netflix watching art, sitting watching entertainment. It's so important, and that content is, I feel, plays a very important role in society. But at the end of the day, it's all about getting the funding and stuff. And getting back to what I was originally going to say, I think the biggest solution that we might have for our situation in Australia is maybe trying to turn it more into a privatized, private company sort of studio type system. And because I always wondered why we didn't have that in Australia and why we were so reliant on the government. And obviously the reason is obviously because there's so much risk behind it. If you're going to invest tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into a project, and then invest it into an Australian project that might not see your return on investment, that's very, very dangerous from a business perspective. So I understand why it hasn't happened, but I also have learned that it is possible to happen. So I think that might be our solution if we do want to see an Australian new wave of cinema, and we want to have a new rise of an Australian artistic expression, because I think we're a great country with so much rich history, and obviously we've had some bad stuff happen and we've had plenty of good stuff happen. And I think with the trajectory that we're moving as a society, nowadays, I think it's exciting to see the potential for stuff like that. And obviously you guys would probably know through your time at film school and all that type of stuff, that you have to study and focus on the French New Wave and all those other different parts of time that cinema has played an important role on a sort of culture and a society and countries, and how people perceive the world. And I think if Australia wants to succeed and have its own Australian new wave of cinema, then that might be potentially a way of doing it, is getting more so into the privatized sector and relying on private companies to kind of spearhead it. Because actually another example I'll use to kind of go on this, and it's slightly different, it's not movie related, but it's regards to the space race and space exploration and stuff, right? So in America, NASA was the spearheading all of the space exploration programs, right? And NASA is a government funded body, and they receive a certain amount of money from the government in order to do space shit, right? And me personally, I actually love space. I have a huge fascination for it. I absolutely love sort of galaxies and stars and looking up at the night sky. I love everything about that, and Interstellar is one of my favorite movies. And one of the big things that has completely revolutionized not only technology and advancements in that sort of field is because the American sort of way that they were doing things was obviously reliant on the government, and they decided, all right, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to shift it over to private companies, private investors, and let them go forth with this endeavor. And that's when we've seen the rise of SpaceX with Elon Musk's company. We're obviously seeing a lot of other different companies. I think Richard Branson is the other one that's doing stuff. I think Jeff Bezos is also somehow involved with some sort of spaceship thing. Anyway, a lot of people who have a shitload of money are investing in space, right? Which I think is far better than relying on a government who can only afford to give you a certain amount of money. And I think that concept of, investing in privatized people for space, I think that same logic applies to the filmmaking industry. So I think, again, that might be a potential for us in Australia. But again, we need to remember that we're also a lot smaller of a population and an economy and stuff. So we're not bringing in as much box office dollars as the United States or definitely China for that matter. So
this is another thing, is that with something creative, like with the space race, it's very cut and dry, like we want to get to space. With something creative, the thing that concerns me with that is that having private companies, it becomes their agenda. It becomes what they want to say, which is fine. But I mean, even like you've got Disney and Netflix and things like that, they have certain brands and certain ways that they want to create their content and certain messages that they want to give. And those messages become subliminal and they become kind of part of society. Like, film is so powerful. It's the way that people understand the world that they live in. So my only concern with that is whether it then becomes a corporate climate, whether the agendas of these private companies become what we see, if that makes sense. I mean, it goes the same with the government giving money, that there's that potential as well. But I find that with the government, a lot of the time they give the money and then they kind of hands off. They don't bring in any agendas, which in a perfect world is what would happen with bringing in private companies. I know that they've tried to, with places like Hoodlum and Ludo and other places like that, the government a few years ago tried to organise to build up those companies and go for a company kind of direction rather than individual project direction. And that worked really well for those companies. But I know from working with a couple of other independent producers that it also had a detrimental effect on those independents who don't have their own large companies and can't facilitate that. So it's very much a difficult industry to balance. Especially when you were saying about art and creativity compared with the need for finance, like
the corporate structure,
yeah, it's a really difficult industry, and I'm very lucky to be working on currently an Australian production, and you can see, like, it's still got a decent budget, but it's not a Netflix budget, and you can see the difference in that and the way that people understand it and everything like that. It's a tough one, and I don't think there's an easy solution. And definitely bringing in private funding would be helpful. Like, any funding that we can get would be helpful. But yeah, that would be my main concern, is just what kind of agenda would that bring in.
I think sadly everyone's going to have an agenda for everything, no matter what.
Yeah.
Like, if
you put money into something, you want to have some kind of creative control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see how the landscape is changing, because I feel like we're going through a social revolution at the moment, and things are changing so quickly, and I feel like a lot of businesses are trying to find their footing of what side of history they want to be on, which is really, really interesting to see. Like, if you take a step back and you look at it objectively, and you're like, I don't know if this is the best thing to be doing. Like you were saying about like Disney and all these other brands that have we want to do this and we want to have a specific message because we're doing this. And those who know me know I'm a huge fan of Disney, but I also criticize a lot of the things that they do. But again, Disney's a family brand that has brought in so much great IP, and they're telling amazing stories in so many different avenues. But at the same time, you know, they're doing like shady stuff. Like for the Mulan live action movie, in the credits of the film, they thanked the part of the Chinese government that's doing terrible things to the Uyghur Muslim population. And it's like, how are you allowing stuff like that? And why were you there to begin with? And it just proves how murky the waters can be.
Yeah.
Disney's such an interesting example, just because, like, with Disney Plus, how many IPs they've actually, like, they own Star Wars now, they own Marvel now, like, eventually they're going to own, like, everything pretty much.
They've got the Infinity Gauntlet of IP.
They've got the Infinity Gauntlet of IPs, like, and like you were saying, like, with Mulan, like, they do some shady stuff here and there, and it's like...
Yeah, and they do a lot of, like, you know, obviously so much reactionary stuff as well. Like, you know, the actress from The Mandalorian, Gina Carano, who got fired because she said some arguably silly things online, you know, that were controversial. She got fired and she lost her job because of that.
Because a couple of comments on Twitter.
Yeah, and like I read those comments and I was like, I understand what you're trying to say. And in today's political climate, I think it's risky to say those things, but I'm also a big proponent of freedom of speech, and I think you should be allowed to say whatever you want and not be criticized in a way that might lead to the termination of your job. And I feel like we live in this situation where, like, there's like, you know, 20,000 people, you know, trending on Twitter about this one issue. Ban or fire them. You know,
cancel culture.
Cancel culture,
You shouldn't be fired because of a comment you made like 10 years ago. Like, it's...
Exactly, and the Kevin Hart example was really depressing for me because, you know, Kevin Hart, who people might not know who he is, he's like a comedian and actor. He's been in a lot of big budget productions and stuff like Jumanji and all that type of stuff, but his lifelong goal was to be the host of the Oscars, and he got given that opportunity, and then people on the internet, bunch of nobodies, basically tweeted and said, nah, you made a joke about homophobic sorts of stuff like in 2011, and the Oscars were like, if you don't apologize, we're not letting you host the Oscars. And he's like, I'm not apologizing for a joke I made 11 years ago, and main point, it's a fucking joke, you know? Like,
silly.
it was silly, and that man, I feel so sorry for him because he lost his dream job. And you know, stuff like that I think is happening, you know, in so many different areas and so many different industries and stuff like that, and it's really sad to see. And I think it's it's definitely interesting with regards to how different companies and organizations have this sort of agenda and how they're pushing that in a way that is kind of that they want to be on the right side of history, and I think it's interesting.
It's very much led by film as well. This is the thing, is like it's cyclic in nature. The way that, like, something like Disney, because they promote certain family values and certain ideas, that then spurns other people in society believing those values and believing those ideas. Like, and then that kind of reverberates and creates more of that, which then, I mean, people need to think for themselves, and in the end, we're becoming very, very sensitive to a lot of things that, I don't know, how do you say it?
Yeah, it's like
people becoming, like, I know it's kind of taken as a joke, but there's a lot of snowflakes out there.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Like, people are kind of being snowflakes, essentially.
Yeah.
Like you said before, like, it's just a joke. Like, obviously there's some things that are, like, absolutely unacceptable to joke about, but other things like giving a political opinion or just making a joke about something, they're not, like, they shouldn't have a sea of random people typing away at their phones and computers, telling them off, and then to be told, you have to apologize. Like,
not only does it not make any sense, but it's the way we figure shit out. Is if we have a discourse and we try and, you know, say, all right, this works correctly, or this doesn't work right, I don't agree with that, or we can change that. That's how we get change and meaningful change, is when we have these discussions. And when you have someone raise a point and then it gets shut down and we just like, all right, we don't want to talk to you ever again, your opinion isn't valid because we don't agree with you. We don't figure shit out that way. That's just my opinion, at least.
Especially when it comes to comedy. Like, so many stand-up comedians get shit on because...
I know. Well, yeah.
But even, like, in terms of film, like, even in like the future, comedy is going to change because people are just not going to joke
It
about
already
the same.
has,
And
yeah.
it already has. Like
Yeah.
people can't joke about the same things they could 10 years ago without like being attacked. So everyone's trying to be careful, and especially in film, like, oh, do I really want to make this film about this topic because I could offend people? So it's completely like crushing our society.
Yeah.
There's no experimentation
Yeah.
because people are too afraid. And that's the thing is it
Which
will
I think
keep-
is actually, sorry to interrupt, but that's the thing that's so important, isn't it? Like taking
Yeah.
your risk with
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
Because then that's how you create something that people react to that's like, wow, that was awesome, or that emotionally affected me in a really profound way. I think that's important.
I think
so
bringing it back to Smile was when I read the script, I was like, wow, there's a lot of like intense language and these are really dark themes. Like I'd love to help you tell this story, and like to see how people react to something like that. You know?
Yeah. And like this is the thing, if we've got these big companies that are pumping out kind of, I say whitewashed, it's not necessarily whitewashed because of course there's a lot of like Disney are trying to make strides in representing other
groups of people, yeah.
yeah, but at the same time it's all still very whitewashed. It's not really necessarily accurate depictions of cultures, and then that propagates more of that kind of whitewashing and all this kind of stuff. It's all very intense. But the more that we get of that, the less experimentation and the less trying to figure out what society needs to change to there is. And that, yeah, I mean, again, going back to that, film is so powerful. It's such a powerful medium. I have my 3 E's of film. Film must be entertaining, engaging, and educational.
Oh, I fucking like that.
Yeah,
That's
so
good.
Entertaining,
I'm going
like
to steal that. That's so good.
Entertaining, it's got to
Entertaining,
actually
engaging,
like make you
wow.
emotional and things like that. Engaging, where it actually grips you and it brings you in. Something that you think about 5 years down the track, you think, oh yeah, that's right, that thing had these themes and I really liked those. And educational, where it teaches you, not necessarily like, I mean, a documentary is going to be educational, but anything that is about the human experience is going to educate you in some way about somebody's perspective. So it's an extremely powerful medium, and it's something that we have to be really careful with.
Yeah, for sure.
I just want to quickly touch back on what you were saying with stand-up comedy, because I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy. Like, when you look at my Netflix and stuff, it's a lot of stand-up comedy is in there. That's the majority of things I watch on there. And obviously, I think it was a couple of days ago, as of filming this, Dave Chappelle, I don't know if you guys know who he is, he released his last special on Netflix, and he obviously in that addresses a lot of the controversy that he's been surrounded in, and addresses the political climate, and talks about his relationship with transgender people and all that type of stuff. And it's really interesting to hear a man who's had been at the forefront of people attacking him, and he's got to a stage now where he just doesn't care. He knows that he's not a bad person, and he can't continue to convince people that, like, I'm not a morally bad person. I'm just making jokes for the sake of entertainment, and at the same time I'm saying something politically interesting at the same time. And I think obviously Dave Chappelle is one of the greatest comedians that's ever lived, and I really enjoy his work. But I think it's interesting that even when he does a special like that, where he literally calls out people for calling him out, and he says, hey, like, I'm not a bad person, I'm doing this to accomplish this, people are enjoying it, the majority of people are enjoying it, but it's like a small minority of vocal people on Twitter like to get up in arms. And yet, even after he talks about all that, people who haven't watched it, I recommend checking it out. I think it's called The Closer. It's on Netflix, Dave Chappelle's special. And he literally calls all this stuff out, and yet even after he does all this and kind of lays it out and makes his point known and sets the record straight, if you will, he still gets people come online and attack him for it. It doesn't make any sense to me. It's very, very strange. And I think it's just a reflection of people like to be outraged. I think it's popular to be outraged. Would you agree?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. I think people, if somebody says something they don't agree with, like, that's it, I hate this person, I'm never going to support them in anything. Like, people just, like you said, they just love to be angry, and they love to talk about it and create a mob of people that are also angry, and it destroys people's lives pretty much. And it's like, I don't know, people just do it so loosely. It's
people want polarized. People are very black and white.
Yeah.
I find people want polarized opinions. Like people either love or hate.
Yeah,
something.
there's one right, there's one wrong, but that's not really
I
how
think,
the
see,
world works.
again, me coming as a person who loves talking about movies and is very likes to debate movies and oh, this movie was good, this movie wasn't. I think there is definitely a way to have those conversations where I love something, you hate something, and yet we can still find a mutual respect and have a conversation that is still like worthwhile.
Yeah, I think
Because
if you love a movie, you can still like find things about it that are not quite up to scratch. Because no movie's going to be perfect, but no movie's going to be completely horrid either. So there's always
Except
some.
maybe The Room. Yeah.
Nice,
But I mean,
like
then
that.
you just throw spoons and everything's golden. Like, how many people go to those?
You always got to
screenings?
find the kind of positive elements of things,
Yeah.
and I think that's really important because it's not just movies; it's politics or
Yeah, it's
anything.
everything,
Just if you can find common ground, I think that's really, really important. And the only way we can do that, is if we come together and have this discourse and figure it out amongst people with rational thought and critical thinking. I think that's so important. But anyway, I feel like this has kind of gone on a rabbit hole, but I feel like it's been a really good conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's worthwhile, this rabbit hole that we've gone down. Now, I do want to kind of steer it back in the direction of your project that you worked on, Smile. Obviously, you guys distributed and posted it on YouTube to kind of grab an audience. And I want to understand why you guys did that, because I think, actually, I'll let you guys explain it and then I'll tell you my thoughts.
So, the thought was, because I was very much of the opinion that we push through post-production really quickly and we we do a cinema screening, we get it out, get it viewed. I am of the, I've worked on other projects before where it's like a short film or something like that, and 3 years later you get to see it, and you work on this project and you're just like, okay, you forget about it, and then it's like, oh, okay, now I can see it, that's great. And with short films that kind of has to happen because a lot of the time you need premiere status for festivals. Looking into the festivals at the beginning of stages of the project, a lot of web series ones, they don't require that. They don't require premiere status. They need to be able to be viewed, and that's the main thing. And what I wanted to do was make sure, again, the whole project was oriented around the cast and crew, making sure that they had something on their books that was going to get them jobs and going to get them recognition. So pushing through post-production and getting it cinema screened and then getting it out on YouTube and getting it just easily accessible was my main goal. The downside with something like that is that then you go like, oh, it's been up for this long and it's only gotten this many views and things like that. Like you don't have, if you don't have eyeballs on it quickly, then people kind of forget about it and things like that. But at the same time, a lot of short films and things that I've worked on where they wait and they hold off with distribution, people forget about it anyway. So we have applied to a couple of distribution platforms as well to see whether they'll distribute it too, to get a bit more distribution. But I just wanted to get it out there and just make sure that the people who were involved, the people who supported us, were able to kind of continue that experience with it, rather than having to wait for something to happen. And I think that's paid off. We've got, like, our main actress, Cam, has been able to sign with a great agent and has got other projects coming her way because...
That's amazing, wow.
Yeah, because she was able to show the content to her agent. And, it's... and I know that Chase, it's probably not all because of Smile, but she's been able to get a camera attachment on a feature, I think it is. And so, we're seeing the rewards coming in, the dividends coming in already. I think that YouTube, as much as it's a saturated environment, it at least gets something viewable. Vimeo, fine, but
It's not mainstream.
yeah.
YouTube has the monopoly.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of why we went down that road.
I think especially as well having the entire series completed, as opposed to like just having this pilot. Like people can just like, you know, binge through it, or like when we had our screening, we just watched through all the episodes in one sitting. And just like everyone just experiencing this big emotional journey from start to finish, and not having like some sort of paywall because it's like exclusive to certain like things or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, when you lock things behind a paywall, it's always that kind of boundary to entry, right?
And I mean, it's great to get money back. And like I was saying before, money would be great. Love money. Money helps with everything. But the main thing is to get those eyeballs and to get the crew and the cast recognised.
And to bounce off that, I think sometimes you have to take these risks earlier in life and invest in something that may not see an immediate return, but the potential and the trajectory is there for you to make it back. You know, I think, because actually, this is another really important thing, is I feel like so many young people are so like, I need to get from A to Z within 2 years. And I you know, by the time I'm 24, I want to be a full-time person and doing this and doing that, and like I want to be like perfect by 24. It's like, no, life isn't that simple, and it's never that easy. So sometimes I feel like you need to, you know, move the chess pieces in the right way so that, you know, you can eventually get your queen to the other side of the chessboard and be like, all right, now I've got control and I can do what I want. Because I feel like so many people, when they want to figure out what their purpose in life is, I think people want to choose what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the good thing about working in film, is that you kind of get to choose the artistic projects that you get to be a part of, which is exciting, but also sometimes scary. So yeah. Any other thoughts on the reasons why you went to YouTube and put it there and all that?
It was just to make it available. Yeah, I mean, looking into other distribution platforms, like we were looking into actually getting like a sales agent to try to sell it to distribution platforms like Amazon and Alter and things like that. And I mean, that would have been good, but again, like then you have to have a subscription to Amazon Prime in order to watch it. And maybe it gets more eyeballs that way. I don't know. We didn't go down that road. But yeah, it was a case of get it out there.
Yeah. I think
Pretty
there's
much.
something as well about being able to just like somebody asks, oh, this looks cool, where can I watch it? And being like, hey, it's on YouTube, here's the link. Like
That instant factor.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened with you and me.
Yeah,
I was
exactly,
like, hey,
yeah.
Natalie, can I watch this thing?
and I was like, yeah,
Yeah,
there
it's
it is,
right
here's
here.
the link.
Yeah. Which I think is way more beneficial, honestly.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump into my thoughts on it. I think it's a really, really good move to put it on YouTube. And you were talking about, like, with regards to viewership and eyeballs. I think this is where people fall down. They're like, all right, I'm just going to put it on the internet and then we'll see what happens. And I think when you're doing anything like this, where you've got sort of like so much investment behind it, or you want to see an end result with it with regards to viewership or numbers or whatever, I still think it's important to have marketing behind it. You know, like you go to see a movie in theaters, it has a marketing campaign. You know, Netflix TV show has a marketing campaign. You see bus ads and YouTube trailers and all the other crap that gets fed to you on social media. So I think even when you're doing stuff like this, it's still really important to have a marketing campaign, whatever that is, whether it's posters or some sort of social media engagement or a fan event or whatever it may
Yeah,
be.
like
There's
we
so many
have
different ways to do it, yeah.
We have a Facebook and an Instagram for Smile as well, and like we're
What is the Facebook and Instagram? Is it got like a @ thing or?
At smile.theseries.
Okay, go follow it.
But yeah, like when we were still like in production, we were posting like little videos from on
BTS
set.
stuff? Yeah.
Behind
Okay.
all this behind
I
the
like that
scenes
stuff,
stuff,
yeah.
little like photos like, hey, meet the director, meet the producer, you know, stuff like that. So just kind of get the ball going and get people into it. Even back when we were just starting. Like I think even you started that before I even came on as
Yeah,
well.
I mean, I hate social media. I'm just gonna say it. I hate social media. But
I'm not a fan of it either.
Yeah.
Have you seen The Social Dilemma?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. We'll watch it because then it'll make you hate social media even
Yeah,
more.
I don't know. I'd probably end up just boycotting Facebook.
You probably should. We probably all should.
We
but
probably all should, yeah.
They've got us by the
Yeah.
hook, line, and sink us.
Yeah, Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
But yeah, so I found with this, I was very much interested in having a social media presence from the beginning. And that was another reason why I wanted to get it out quite quickly, is because I was just like, I'm running out of content. So having that social media presence and building up an audience before we distributed was something very important to me. And we had a couple of social media people on. I've ended up taking it over because it's a very long haul kind of aspect of production. Like you can't have it done in the time.
There's no
that it
end
takes.
date for it, yeah.
Yeah, it just continues. And I mean, at the moment, I'm a bit lax with it because I'm working 50 to 55 hour weeks. So I don't really get the time to do anything. But trying to at least keep people updated on the festivals, things like that. And we've still got a pretty decent following, I think. I can't remember how many people we're up to, and I'm not going to say what I think because it's probably completely wrong. But we're at a decent number of people that are actually following, and keeping them updated and making sure that it's open to them commenting back and having thoughts about it and sharing it with their friends and family and things like that, I think is quite important.
Because, yeah, the other good thing about when you post stuff on the internet or YouTube or whatever it may be is that there's always that possibility of it just blowing up and just going viral. Like, you know, I've had a couple of videos where I'm like, wow, I did not expect it to get that many views.
It's never what you expected to be.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes, see, the weird thing about YouTube is, like, if you want to go really in depth and figure out all the analytics and abuse that system, then sure. But, you know, sometimes the algorithm just works in your favor, you know, and that's the weird thing with these sort of situations is that, you know, sometimes it might just work out in your favor. And the other good thing about the internet is that it doesn't have to be an immediate pop off as well. Like, you know, you might upload something in, let's say, January, and it gets, like, let's say 1,000 views by the time we get to now October, right? And then you get to November, and then boom, all of a sudden it gets like 50,000 views. That's how the internet works sometimes. You know,
People
a lot of
discover things like 5 years later, and it's why is this 5-year-old video on my trending? Like,
a lot of viral videos come up that way. You know, it'll be posted in, like, 2017, and then all of a sudden it's getting millions of views now. It's like, what the hell? It doesn't make any sense, but that's how these things work sometimes. Yeah,
And you just have to hope that it's for the right reason.
for the right reasons. That's a very good point. Absolutely, yeah.
I don't want to trend because of cancer culture. That's
Absolutely.
for sure.
No, none of us do. God
But
forbid.
no, I'm just waiting for Cam and Natalie to become really famous so that then people go back to it. So yeah.
this
Chop,
was
chop.
her starting project.
Absolutely. My next question is with regards to this whole distribution thing is what do you think, and this is for both of you, what do you think is more beneficial? Do you reckon going down this online distribution method where you rely on social media and kind of getting it out to as many eyeballs as possible, relying on that viewership, instant viewership, I guess, or going down the festival circuit or / the more mainstream, legit process where you show it to industry professionals? So what do you think is more beneficial, going straight online or down the industry circuit?
Well, we're going down pretty much a combination of both. The beauty of web series is that people expect it to be online. A short film, you kind of have to choose which way you go down. But that's why I wanted to do a web series in the first place. The two reasons was character development. You can develop a character over a long-term time period. But also the fact that, it's expected to be online. So you kind of lose that choice in the equation. So you get to have everything. You get to have your cake and eat it too. So we've had interest from a production company that then wants to make it into a feature film.
Okay.
And if it's a feature film, then they can sell it. We've been able to do that because they've been able to view it on YouTube, because they've been able to see the social media presence, because they've been able to see the festival circuit. Like, all of these factors adding in give them an idea of where it could go.
Very simply, that's why I think that option is better. But
Yeah, so short films, your hands are tied a bit more, because if you put it out online, then you lose your festivals. And if you put it out online and it doesn't get all the views that it needs and it doesn't have the festival recognition, then industry people won't be interested in it. So you kind of, it's this trifecta that you have to be really careful with. But yeah, web series, we bypass that.
I think the beauty of it being a web series as well is like the format it is, because they're kind of like about 10 to 15-minute episodes each that kind of make up about an hour. So there is that, like, opportunity to make it a feature, but there's also, like, because people have short attention spans these days, like, seeing that a video is 10 minutes long is like, oh yeah, I can get through that, and then they get hooked, and then watch another one, suddenly they've finished it all in one sitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea of this people's attention span, I always find it an interesting conversation, because it's like people either have one of two things. They have a really short attention span where it's like, 3 to 5 seconds, or it's like they're sitting around listening to a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
It's really weird how there's that kind of two polar opposites, Like, I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's a psychological, scientific answer for it. I obviously know the reason why we are constantly scrolling as a generation is because of that sort of addictive sort of... again, the Social Dilemma talks about this. If you haven't seen the Social Dilemma on Netflix, I implore you, please watch it. It'll change your whole perception of how social media works. And I think it's one of the most important documentaries that's come out in recent times. But yeah, all that sort of stuff is really interesting with regards to grabbing people's attention and maintaining eyeballs and people basically keeping people sucked in. Because within the television format, I think that's why the cliffhanger trope has become so popular. Because it's like, all right, if we leave it open-ended, then people will be like, oh, I need to find out what happens next. And I feel like that was kind of the origin or the birth of that sort of like attention span and grabbing people's attention. Would you agree?
Yeah.
100%.
And the beauty of the web series, the way that it is as well, is episode 6 kind of sits as its own little short film in a way. You don't get the backstory of everything that kind of brings her to that point, but you get a bit of an idea of what's happened. And it was almost accidental. When I was writing the scripts, I did want to kind of create that, and I did look back on episode 6 and make sure that it kind of worked as its own entity. But that's worked well because a lot of web series festivals, they only want to see one episode. Because of course, like, they can't show a whole series for 16 different projects. They want to be able to pick lots of different projects but only show one episode of each one. So we've ended up with the project on Film Freeway. It's just episode 6 that's there. And when we did the festival applications, in the cover letter I was just like, but if you want to see the whole thing, you can check it out here. So yeah, it's really interesting kind of. I guess what we tried to do was try to cover all bases. Be like, yeah, we've got a short film option. It could be a feature. It's a full series. Like everything that we could get out of something, we tried to get out of it.
Yeah, especially like what you were saying before, like having all this social media and like the opportunity for this to go in multiple different directions, like to get future funding for something more. There's like, it's a lot more open to that.
Were you thinking about that when you were writing the script for it, the marketability of it?
Yeah, I definitely had my producer brain on quite a bit. So when I was first thinking about the story, I kind of was looking at a short film, and I had some advice from an advisor who kind of said, like, have you thought about web series? And I kind of, because I was thinking short form or feature, what would I do? How am I going to get it kind of covering all those bases the most? And that's when I went down the web series format. And it was actually because I was working on Film School the Musical, which was a project done
Dean
by...
Cherkoff's project. Shout out to Dean. Was on episode 1.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dean.
I was part of the writer's room with the first, talking about the series and everything like that. And I did an original pilot script that then was kind of pieces of that were taken to kind of amalgamate into the pilot episode. Shelley Penelope, all my idea. Love her character. I kind of went down like, maybe a web series is the best way to go. And it just worked really well with the concept of kind of building each day as an episode on her journey, and being able to kind of have this kind of slow burn horror really appealed to me. And it kind of, it would work as a feature as well, but I feel like having that episodic, like you were saying, means that people can have like a bite-sized chunk. They can be like, they're not going like, oh God, I've got to watch an hour and a half of this kind of indie production that I don't know what the quality is going to be like. They can instead watch 10 minutes and be like, oh, okay, it's not bad. I'll give another episode a shot.
Yeah, I think especially like because I've only really worked on short films, so this was the first time that was like something a lot bigger. Seeing it in its parts, so like it's not an hour feature, it's a hour miniseries sort of. So even like in the editing room, it was like you edit one episode 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, instead of just being overwhelmed by like there's this huge production we have to do, but it feels a lot more it's like bite-sized pieces, especially for like me as a director and like the crew as well, like just feeling like we've got these little bites that all make up one thing.
Did you guys shoot it sequentially? Like, did you shot it out of order?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that trickier from a directing perspective? Like
Not
trying to
really.
figure out,
I think-
all right, this part's happening here, but
I
like
think,
we need to remember this has already happened, sort of
yeah.
thing.
So like I think it's the way Xanthie structured it, like certain scenes would be later in the schedule because of how much like emotional weight they hold, and it would benefit a lot more from actors being very close to each other after working together for about a month and things like that. But other than that, it was mostly like out of order. Like we started off with filming the graveyard stuff on day 1, which is stuff from episode 3 and 4. So, and then what did we finish on?
I think it was still episode 6 that we finished on. I can't remember.
Episode 6, but there was a scene from episode 2 that was our final day. But episode 6 was pretty well near the end of the production schedule.
I love paperwork and scheduling and things like that. Like, that's my jam.
Good, because I hate it.
As long as someone likes it.
Yeah, so I found...
You are very valuable to this industry because there's people like me who's just like fucking paperwork. Oh God damn it. So
yeah, I found it really interesting to kind of, when I was doing the scheduling, kind of thinking about what had emotional weight that kind of the actors needed to go through certain aspects in order to get to that. Making sure that by the time we got to the really gritty stuff that we had established a rapport as a team. Like the stuff that was really important to nail had to be a little bit later so that we could work out all the kinks for the team and everything like that.
yeah, that's really clever.
Yeah, and shooting it out of order isn't something that's
No, it's not.
foreign. Like it's something that a lot of
You normally
productions
shoot
do.
stuff based off locations. So if
Yeah.
you're, let's use your example, the graveyard, you shoot all the graveyard stuff. Doesn't matter if it's episode 1, 2, 7, 5, 60. Doesn't matter. You shoot all the graveyard stuff on that day, then you shoot all the basement stuff on this day. That's a very common thing in industry. Yeah.
And we were very lucky. The place that we had as the house had the basement as part of it. So we kind of went up and down a few times in order to kind of work with the space that we had, which that it was an Airbnb that we ended up with for that location. And the owners were amazing and the whole experience was really amazing in that house as well. But yeah, so we were having to do a lot of location-based, like the church scene had to be, I think the church scene was one of the later...
It was one of the last things.
later locations, even though that's episode 1 and things like that. But we were quite lucky with the house of being able to kind of work it around based on the content, which was good. Whereas a lot of places, like a lot of productions, they might have like certain scenes in one house for one location and then certain scenes in another house for meant to be the same location. Then you've got a match and all that kind of stuff. We were very lucky.
Yeah.
Question for you, Natalie.
Yes.
So, from directing perspective, obviously there's a lot of deep and heavy themes, especially when the father character comes into the story. There's a lot of intense stuff that goes on, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, very intense.
So, from a director's perspective, what's it like working with your actors and kind of trying to get to that place and then accomplishing that on screen? What's that like?
I think, like, definitely, as we were saying before, the rehearsals were really valuable because we kind of, like, you know, everyone was open and emotional, and it's like we all know these are very dark themes. And we all know that at the end of the day, it's obviously acting, and we have these tools to bring out, like, this kind of acting. Like, for example, with the scene where Richard, he's walking up to Grace to violate her. The way we designed it is that for him to look upon her and think about something like that he loves, right? And then the audience would see that and associate that he's expressing on his face with what was going on in the scene. So, like, and especially with Cam, we work together because Faith's character has a lot of dark thoughts and goes through a lot of dark things, and we would sit down and we would just kind of talk, like, you know, relate it to our own lives, relate it to the character. Like, Cam was amazing. She really sat down. She was like, I want to get in the head of Faith. I want to be her for this production. I was like, yeah, I'm happy. Like, let's do it, you know? And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really important is to have actors that are really committed to bringing the characters to life, because so many actors just don't give it 100% and they don't fully invest, especially on like lower budget things and a lot of student production type stuff. The actors that I've worked with have always, you know, given me 100%, so I've always been very grateful for the talent that I've worked with. But yeah, it's interesting, especially working in the Brisbane local community with regards to actors. Sometimes you find some bloody good gems, and then other times you're just like, yeah, you're not going to make it. But, you know.
I think it's about what you give them as well. Like, that's the thing, is that you guys had a good discourse and you were very open to the cast having an opinion and being able to have their own take on things as well, which I think a lot of actors really respond to. And if you're going to be someone who's just like, okay, this is your character, this is what you say, do it.
Like, as much as I'm the director, I would ask them all the time, like, what do you think your character's feeling in this moment? Like, what do you what's going on through your head, especially like before we're shooting a scene, to kind of help prep them into that mindset. Like, how does Faith feel after Peggy's done this to her, for example? Like, and sort of getting like those emotions up. Yeah, I think like Cam definitely, because obviously in episode 6 there's a lot of very dark moments where she kills people. She would like get into this mindset. Like, she would kind of go off on her own and be like, I'm just going to get into the mindset. And it was like, because I haven't directed too often, but seeing an actor really put that much effort into it was just really like wow, she's doing that for us. You know, that's been crazy.
And it's because you were so open to them getting the most out of it as well. Whereas, just kind of saying like, just do it, and not having that discourse. You can't expect an actor to be able to bounce off of that. They're going to only put in as much as you put in. That's
why the relationship between director and actor is so symbiotic.
Yeah. So, and I think that was a big thing was with the rehearsals we had. I was considering whether we don't do rehearsals and make sure that it's all very raw and things like that, but doing the rehearsals was very important to be able to...
Yeah, very wise move.
Definitely being on set, like I was saying, like now that we've done all this rehearsal, it's like, all right, you guys know what to do. Let's like talk about the character a little bit to get you into the headspace, and then we can just shoot it pretty much.
If you're going to go with that raw approach where you're like, all right, let's make sure it's as authentic as possible, you need to either do it in two ways. You need to make sure you're working with improv type people and it's an improv type moment. And the actors that are doing that are trained and talented at that, or you're doing it for a specific story reason. So like the best example I have is in the first Alien movie, right, where the xenomorph pops out of the chest, right? So that moment, none of the actors knew what was about to happen. They just knew that, I think it's John Hurt's character, right? He's like feeling unwell and something is about to happen, but none of the actors knew, right? So when the xenomorph pops out of its chest and you see that gruesome shot that's become iconic, none of the actors knew that was about to happen,
So
and as a result,
authentic,
they all reacted accordingly, and it was authentic. So it all depends on your approach and your story and all that sort of stuff. But that's a great example of a moment where you're like, all right, let's go with this raw, because the reaction will be so much greater because of it. But yeah, I'm always a proponent for rehearsals, and what I've learned in my time at casting is that it's so important to do what you were doing and stuff, is ask those questions and keep your actors engaged and making sure that they're on the same page. Because one of the things that you do in casting is that because it's basically like a job interview, right?
Yeah.
You're like, all right, what do you see in the character? What about this character is interesting to you? And the way they answer that question will indicate whether they're right for the role or not. I know when I was casting the grad slate project for Griffith Film School, A Christmas Murder, that was one of the key tactics that I utilized, is like that me and James Marshall, the original director of that project, we were asking these questions of like, all right, what do you think would happen now, and why do you think this would happen, and what do you see in this character? And certain actors would give us a response, and then after the audition would conclude, we'd be like, all right, we could see why they thought that, but that's not what we want, and that's not the direction that the character would go in the story. And then you find other people who answer in a way it's like, wow, that was bang on. That's exactly what James, the director, envisioned when he was writing the script. And when you find, again, that symbiotic relationship where you're both on the same wavelength, that's when you can kind of really work together in a really productive way. So I think that's so important, is just making sure that you're all on the same page, because, if you're operating on this sort of perspective and then someone else is operating on this different perspective, that's when you get creative differences, as Hollywood likes to constantly say.
But I absolutely like any kind of feedback. It's like, what do you think about this, what do you think about that? Like I love to just keep talking to the actors about the character, and especially when in rehearsals we could just talk about like different angles things could be taken, and why taking it in this direction is better than this direction, kind of thing. And because especially I think like rehearsals really were good for this production, because we had a lot of specific kind of camera angles and dynamics in terms of like someone standing above someone else, especially because Faith is really in a vulnerable position the entire miniseries up until episode 6, where she has the power and she's suddenly standing over people and things like that. And she's even on a different side of screen as well. We kind of tried to make it so that in the earlier episodes she was more to the right and kind of more to the corner, so that she had a bit of headroom to look more vulnerable. And then as like it kind of progresses and her mindset starts to change, by episode 6 she's like in the top left corner, like pretty much, and everyone that was before above her is now below her. Because she's kind of killing them.
Yeah, visual storytelling is really powerful in that way, and a lot of projects get consumed by this like exposition dumps of like, this is what's happening, and trying to explain it to you like you're a dumb person. But I always really appreciate when directors and storytellers use visual storytelling as like a key way of communicating what's really going on. I think Christopher Nolan's really good at that. There's so many great filmmakers out there that do that.
Xanthie's dialogue was very, like, it didn't explain to you what was going on. Like, we just get put straight into the scene with Faith and her mother, and the way their dynamics introduced immediately tells you, oh, I see what's happening. Like, she doesn't have to tell the audience she's a horrible mother. Just the things she's saying is all indirectly expressing that. And then, like, with the way the camera angles are done and how we've edited it, makes you feel like, oh, God, horrible mother, here we go.
Any more thoughts on the project that you guys worked on, Smile? Anything else you want to share, or stories or whatnot?
It was just such a pleasure to work with the cast and crew. That's probably my biggest takeaway. Post-production was a nightmare. We did have some really good people in post-production. Natalie, of course, was a big driver of the post-production so many times that I was just like, oh, I can't do anymore. This is just like, I can't handle it. But the fact that she was still so passionate about it and still such a driving force was really a big save of that. And I guess if anybody's wanting to get people on their project, look into the cast and crew of Smile, because they're amazing people to work with.
I was going to say, I'll have it linked below. You guys can definitely check it out. It's available on YouTube, ready to stream. All the episodes are there. And like Natalie and Xanthie were saying earlier, it's very digestible, bite-sized episodes. Definitely check it out if you're interested. I would highly recommend it. I quite enjoyed it. And I think that's one of the most important things with regards to these short form stories that have a lowish budget, is making sure that the technical side doesn't overwhelm the story. And that would be my compliment to you, is I feel the story was really, really engaging, and it was able to keep me hooked from episode to episode. And by the time you see where the character starts off in episode 1 to where they get in the last episode and the journey that they've taken there, I found quite interesting all the way through, but also in a weird way rewarding, even though it's kind of fucked up the ending.
Yeah. Did you, because this is my interesting aspect of it, is did you find her monstrous by the end of it? Like, were you still empathizing by the end of it?
I wouldn't say she was monstrous. I would say she had descended to hell in a way that she was irredeemable. And it's interesting because she was kind of justified in the way she was thinking, which I think is really, really like crazy to think, because obviously the way her overprotective mother guided her throughout her life, and then obviously the stuff the father had done to her, it was kind of just a recipe for disaster. And then obviously I didn't know this when I was watching it, but when you were discussing all the stuff about Medusa and all these gods and stuff and all the mythology that you were drawing from, I'm like, I see what you were trying to go for there. So it's really, really clever. So compliments to you and compliments to you for getting it done as well, because it's no easy feat bringing a script to the screen. So anything else you want to talk about, or is do we wrap it there?
Firstly, like, I'm so grateful that you brought me on board to direct, because there were, like, I think you said a few others were interviewed and I was like, but yeah, like, and like you said, like, I've always wanted to do justice to Xanthie's vision, and like, because you've spent years on this production, I just like, if I can bring this to life in a way that Xanthie's very proud of, then I've done well. And like, if all the actors watch it and they say, that's fantastic. If the crew watch and they're like, wow, all my effort that I put into this really came up to be something beautiful, then I'm really happy with that. So yeah.
Job well done, guys. Really, really good stuff. Obviously, the one big thing that I want to kind of leave us on is when you're working in an industry like this, I think it's crucial that you're always trying to find the right people and working with the right people. And through conversations like this that I've really, really enjoyed, and that I think I hope we all agree has been very productive and quite insightful. I think it's very important that everyone's working towards a collective goal, and that they're, again, on that train track, moving at a steady pace, so that you don't get stuck and that things don't crumble, because things crumble when you don't communicate and when you don't work together. And to tie this whole kind of conversation up, I guess it's important to remember that we're all humans. We're all trying to strive towards living our best life. We all want to find our purpose in life, and making sure that we're doing the best that we can, and we can all be a lot nicer to each other, whether both in the real world and online, especially online.
Don't be like Faith.
Exactly.
Don't
exactly.
be like Faith.
So on that note, I will conclude this episode. I don't want to draw out too much more of people's time. I think we're keeping it short, sweet, concise, to the point, and I think this was a really, really quality conversation. So thank you both for coming on. I really, really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed it. So thank you both for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for
Caleb.
inviting us. This has been really great.
I was going to say, one of the things I try to do with this podcast is I want to try and push out people's work that they've done, and try and share that with other people. And we only have a small audience here at Caleb's Conversation Podcast thus far, but whether it's one person that kind of jumps onto this series and really enjoys it and finds something out of it and productive, I think would be something that we've accomplished together, I feel like, through this conversation. So yeah, thank you guys for coming on, and that wraps up today's episode of Caleb's Conversation Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it, whether you are listening or watching anywhere around the world. Making sure that you guys are following the podcast link, subscribing to the channel, all that good stuff. Making sure you're staying tuned for more content like this coming very, very soon. And thank you very much for watching or listening, and I will catch you in the next episode very, very soon.